Hello there. You guys doing good? You having a good day? Well, so am I, as I'm reviewing the final 2 issues of the Archie Sonic Champions arc.
For those of you who skipped last week's video, Sonic, Tails, and Amy Rose entered a fighting tournament to win the prize Chaos Emerald for world-saving reasons. Flashbacks were had, new old characters were introduced, a few fights went down, and Robotnik plots how best to be a sore loser. Oh, and this mint green hedgehog is a woman of wealth and taste.
All that said and done, let's dive right into Sonic the Hedgehog numbers 270 and 271 and see if they hold the same quality that the previous 2 issues had.
I'm not talking about the covers for all the same reasons as last time. Now then, the last 2 issues opened with flashbacks to an adaptation of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Sega Master System.
So naturally, this one also opens on a flashback to an adaptation of Sonic Heroes.
So not only is this story adapting Master System Sonic 2 and Sonic Heroes in flashbacks, but this story arc is also an adaptation of Sonic the Fighters, and the overarching comic story at the time is an adaptation of Sonic Unleashed. That's 4 adaptations for the price of 1!
But wait! There's more!
Turns out, it will be revealed in a later story that the events of the Master System Sonic 2 adaptation will lead immediately into an adaptation of Tails' Sky Patrol.
Geez, what next? An adaptation of Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine?
Regardless, I should point out that this flashback isn't exactly taking place during Sonic Heroes' story. Much rather, it happens a little before the events of that game. Specifically while Casino Park is being built. And for some reason, Robotnik is just gifting this locale to Breezy for basically nothing. I mean, sure, the point of Casino Park is for it to serve as a roadblock for Sonic if he tries to mess with Eggman's plans, but it's still out of character for him to be giving his stuff away for hardly any reason at all. Of course, as you've probably guessed, and Breezy has just pointed out, this isn't actually Eggman. Much rather, it's Neo Metal Sonic in disguise.
What a twist!
Needless to say, Neo is none too pleased that somebody knows he even, well, exists. So naturally, he tells Breezy to stay silent on the matter, or else.
Breezy, however, counter-intimidates him in the most effective way possible. By coming on to him.
And judging from Neo's expression in this panel, that was the last thing he was expecting. Anyway, Breezy assures him that her love don't cost a thing, and I'm pretty sure that Neo Metal Sonic is just plain dumbfounded by this entire situation. Ma'am, please get out of my personal space. I'm kind of using it. Odd, you didn't have any problems with getting close and personal a second ago. I was threatening your life. Really? You could have fooled me, hot stuff. Can I go now? And then this flashback ends, and in the present, Bean and Knack have been paired up for a round in the championship, which greatly amuses Sonic. Tails, however, is still upset about his prior loss to Honey the Cat, not just because she beat him, but because she made him look like a chump in front of the entire world.
Oh boy, if he thinks what Honey did to him was embarrassing, I hope he never finds out what the writing team for Sonic Forces did to his character.
Not to get sidetracked or anything, but one thing that I hate about more modern Sonic games is that they've regressed Tails' character to just being a generic sidekick who occasionally does science-y stuff, all the while forgetting that one of Tails' core motivations, across multiple continuities, is to be just as great a hero as Sonic. Fortunately, Sonic does remember this, and he gives Tails a nice little pep talk, stating that, even though Tails did lose one fight, he's still won hundreds of others by not giving up. Something that everybody in Sonic's world knows, and that the writers for the games could stand to remember.
But now that Sonic has lifted Tails' spirit, how's that fight between Knack and Bean going?
Very poorly for Knack, as Bean's barrage of bombs is keeping him on the ropes. That and, well, one of his employees performing a gymnastics stunt off his face isn't doing his pride any favors. Something which isn't helped by the fact that Breezy has practically set him up to fail. And it is at this moment that I should mention the holographic arenas that each match takes place in. Not only are each of these invocations of the character stages from Sonic the Fighters, but they also show up in the order they did in the game, and almost every character fights on their respective locale. Such as in the first issue, where every character who lost fought on their stage, except for Sonic, who beat Segata on Knuckles' stage, and Amy, who traumatized an innocent reference character on hers. This is very impressive, as the writer, Ian Flynn, could have just decided not to do this, or majorly screwed up the story's narrative by forcing this in when he didn't need to, and yet, not only did he do it, but he managed to weave it seamlessly into the story without disrupting the narrative.
Nothing much else to say other than this is awesome.
That said, the reason I'm talking about it now, as opposed to earlier or later, is because Knack's stage in Sonic the Fighters is Casino Night, the stage that Bean and him are currently fighting on. And seeing as Breezy did in fact set the two hooligans up to fight each other, and as she is in charge of a lot of casinos, it's easy to interpret this as a clever way of her taunting Knack. And Knack lets his ego get the better of him, believing instead that she just wants to make him look like a fool. This leads to one of the dumbest decisions he has ever made, as, after he flying dropkicks Bean, and the duck stays conscious, he uses his status as leader of Team Hooligan to pull a Johnny Cage.
This is where you fall down.
Okay, bleh.
Yeah, I'll explain why this was a poor decision on Knack's part later.
But yeah, Breezy's been messing with the championship's brackets, a fact that Espio is well aware of, as he was the one that got Knuckles added to the tournament roster. Bear in mind, he was only able to do this by ninjaing his way into the casino's main computer room, hacking in, and swapping an existing competitor for a guy who was just passing through, and might not even be there when the tournament starts. Which, when I say it like that, makes it seem like a bad idea. But let's look at the positives. Seeing as Knuckles did join the championship, that's one more person on the hero's side, and one more chance for them to win the world-saving gem. While if Knuckles didn't show up, they'd have one less person to fight, so it's all good. Except not really, as Espio points out, his changes to the roster should have been caught and corrected. And, well, remember that problem that Scratch and Grounder had in issue 1 that they needed Breezy to take a look at? Turns out that they actually did catch the changes Espio made, but Breezy decided to leave them as is because Knuckles would make her tournament more interesting.
Bear in mind that she had less reason than Espio to believe that Knuckles would even show up, which might seem like an oversight, and it is. That's the point.
Or, to put it another way, while this comic has been characterizing Breezy by building up her character's strengths, it has wasted no time setting up her character flaws. The most prominent being that, despite her composed, calculating demeanor, she is actually rather impulsive, best emphasized in both the aforementioned bit where she keeps Espio's roster changes as is, and another scene from the first issue, the bit where Sonic convinces her to only schedule his fights at night. In both of these, Breezy makes rashly impulsive decisions, all for the sake of making her championship more entertaining. The first, keeping Espio's roster changes, being poorly informed and a major risk, while the second wouldn't be too big an example, if it weren't for the fact that she immediately caved when Sonic barely threatened dropping out of the tournament without so much as trying to haggle. Both of which establish Breezy as somebody who will take a big risk on blind faith, or make quick concessions if she has even a decent chance of making or losing massive gains.
Which is good because, if this story had only built up her strengths, it'd be very difficult for the audience to find her compelling, or to believe that any other character could ever beat her.
Speaking of character flaws, in Amy's match with Knuckles, she gets distracted by wondering if her defeating him would impress Sonic or not. Which is unfortunate, as Knuckles assumed that she'd be giving this fight her all, so he gave it his all in response. And his all was enough to break the arena and send an unaware Amy flying into the crowd at Mach speed. Now, under standard circumstances, Knuckles going all out against Amy would be a reasonable course of action, but right here, right now, he's just lucky that nobody in the audience was hurt and that the only major damage she took was to her pride.
And even then, I'm pretty sure the only reason Knuckles is still allowed to compete in the tournament is because Breezy can use stunts like this to get more people to tune in and watch.
Regardless, Sonic promises to redeem Amy's honor by beating Knuckles in the final round, but first things first, he has to redeem Tails' honor by beating Honey in the semi-finals, which is going to be a lot easier than he thought, as Honey is going to throw the fights, which, given that Breezy is manipulating the fights, mercenaries working for a dictator have gotten involved, and that she only joined the tournament to promote her business, it's probably a good idea to back down and let the professional heroes deal with all this, especially when the fate of the world is dependent on the outcome of this tournament.
That said, Honey is also a bit of a fangirl for brawling, so she's still going to make this fight a good one, even if she's gonna lose.
And what a good fight it is, as both fighters put in a good effort while using several cool moves that make me wish Sega would make a modern version of Sonic the Fighters. That said, just like the fights from last issue, this fight has some intercuts, but unlike other fights, these intercuts are ads for in-universe stuff, such as this teaser for Chow Boom, to which I have 2 questions.
1. Why was this never made into an actual thing? 2. Why has Sega never made a Chow garden game where you can get your Chow this swole? It's because Sega's incompetent, isn't it?
Oh, and there's also this commercial featuring another revamped Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog character, Wes Weasley, who has probably the best new look when compared to his original appearance out of any of the characters reintroduced in these comics. Also, the drink he's advertising is named Cheo Cola.
Are you telling us to literally drink liquid chaos?
Yes. But getting back to the plot, Sonic beats Honey by throwing her out of the ring, and we are treated to another ad, this one being for Breezy TV. I only bring this up because it clearly shows that Breezy did grow up impoverished, which is interesting as, in the cartoon, she was actually a robot that was built by Eggman to trick Sonic. So the fact that she was changed from that to an organic being with possible romantic feelings for Metal Sonic is something I find rather fascinating.
But enough meta speculation. Up next is Knack's fight with Knuckles, and unlike last round, Breezy isn't letting him use his pistol. So how's he gonna play this one out?
A question he wouldn't have to ask himself if he had just let Bean win their fight, as not only is the Duck far better at close-range brawling, but his bombs aren't something that can be taken off of him, because he literally pulls those out of thin air, so he'd have a better chance of beating Knuckles hands down. But Knack just had to let his ego get the better of him, and now he's going up against a guy who just one-shot the girl who, in the previous continuity, regularly one-shot him. However, Bark has a suggestion: mess with Knuckles' head and psych him out, a strategy that apparently works phenomenally well, as Knuckles just stands there while Knack insults and even punches him. "What's the matter? Gonna cry? Ashamed you're such a failure? Just walk on out of the ring. I'll find those Master Emerald shards for ya." Yo, hello? Did I break you entirely, or just waiting for you to hold still for a second? And after tricking Knack, Jotaro style, Knuckles then proceeds to absolutely pummel him into submission, which is just so satisfying to watch, and not just because it's written and drawn very well. For those of you who aren't aware, at the time this story was being printed, Sega was giving Knuckles' character even worse treatment than they've been giving Tails, specifically by turning him into a dumbass. So seeing Knuckles being awesome here, not just in this fight but throughout the entire story, is something which I always find enjoyable when reading this. But with Knack defeated, that brings the semifinals to a close, which means only the final bout between Sonic and Knuckles remains to be fought. Something which the pair of friendly rivals are excited for, and that Breezy thinks is so important that the stage doesn't even have a holographic venue projected over it.
Which gives me yet another reason to wish that a modern-era Sonic the Fighters game would be made, as fighting on a stadium venue that originated from the comics would be amazing!
Unfortunately, Knack is a bit of a sore loser, so he's found himself a nice camping spot to set up and start taking pot shots at our heroes. Moving on to the second issue, we open on... not a flashback, which I just don't get.
And not just because all the other issues opened on a flashback, but because this issue does have a flashback. However, it only comes in 2 pages after the start.
Granted, all it does is state plot and character information about Breezy that we already knew, gives the S6 squad an opportunity to be funny, and reveals which class in TF2 is Breezy's main.
Gentlemen?
But that's still no good reason for them to not open on this, especially when, if they did, Sonic wouldn't have had to redundantly ask how Breezy even got the emerald. Which is redundant because that question doesn't even have an interesting answer, like if she had to pay somebody a large amount of money for it, or if she stole it from somebody else. Instead, the S6 squad just found it, and that's it.
It feels like this issue was supposed to open on the flashback, yet somebody in editorial demanded that it open on Sonic and Knuckles' fight, and Flynn just had to go along with it.
But, now that I've gotten that bit of negativity out of the way, how's that final round going? Fantastically! Not only is this a fight between the main character and one of their oldest rivals, which if you can't get that right, you're bad at writing, but the dialogue between the pair is great, and the artwork is amazing. Be it the opening page, which should have been page 3, giving a nice bit of compare and contrast between them, or the sequence which homages a few times they've fought in the games, or even this marvelous 2-page spread which shows not only more fighting between Sonic and Knuckles, but also the reactions of several prominent characters. Well, prominent characters, and this random fish girl, who I'm sure will never show up anywhere else other than this single comic panel. Speaking of, I could talk about each and every one of these character reactions, but there's only one that I find truly noteworthy, that being the reaction of the freedom fighter, Antoine.
And I know I said I wouldn't be going into detail on any of the freedom fighters when reviewing this story, but I'm making an exception here.
See, Antoine is actually kind of a curious case as Sonic characters go. He's actually a rival for Sonic, if not his first rival, as he first appeared in Archie Sonic number 1, sometime in July 1993. And he showed up in the first episode of Sonic Sat-Am, which aired on September 18th of the same year. That's roughly half a year before Knuckles was introduced in Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and, get this, exactly 5 days before Sonic CD introduced Metal Sonic on the 23rd of September.
Holy Terran tater tots.
That said, unlike all of Sonic's other heroic rivals who are brawlers that enjoy going toe-to-toe with the blue blur, or Silver who is mostly indifferent to fighting Sonic but has powers practically designed to beat him, Antoine was never a physical rival to Sonic. Much rather, he was an intellectual rival who fought Sonic in the arena of witty dialogue and competed with him for the romantic affections of "I'll explain it some other time." And sure, Antoine did get more fight savvy as the older Archie continuity went on, and even took a level in badass after the reboot, but even then the pair primarily spar with their words rather than their fists.
But why am I even bringing this up? Especially when Antoine isn't all that important to this story. Take a closer look at what he's holding in his hand.
That's right, it's a Knuckles flag. The OG Sonic rival is rooting for the other OG Sonic rival to win. That is both clever, cheeky, and just a little cute. Speaking of cute writing, Knack has tasked Bean with blowing up Casino Park's main power generator.
And he's going to use plastic explosives for this task, right?
Ha! No! Instead, he summons some of his ball bombs and uses bubblegum to stick them in place. The absolute mad lad. So, Knack gives the signal, Bean blows the generator, the lights go out. and Knack only misses his shot because Metal Sonic enters the building by busting through the platform he was perched on. Of course, taking out the generator also disabled the security system for the casino vault, so Metal just grabs the emerald. Getting out, however, will be slightly less easy, as not only does Sonic give chase, but Knuckles, Amy, Espio, and even Honey try to get the drop on him. Of course, Metal saw that coming, and he dodges all of their attacks, after which he does his best Levock Call impression to get away from Sonic. A strategy that becomes his undoing, as Tails takes advantage of Metal's current lack of maneuverability to sneak attack him, and at just the right moment for the backup generator to kick in and reactivate all of the casino's defenses. Not that it would have mattered, as both Tails and Sonic could take Metal Sonic on their own, never mind if the other four got in on the action. But Robotnik knows this is a losing battle, and he just got word on another Chaos Emerald that is free for the taking. So Metal buzzes off, Tails is declared the winner by technicality, Knuckles introduces Chip to Sonic and co, and that old guy that Metal was interrogating in the first issue turns out to be important in the next issue.
But who cares about all that when we got Breezy and Honey discussing a business deal, baby?
In all seriousness, this bit with Honey and Breezy discussing business is great, especially when it stops being about business and starts being about their characters. With Honey not accusing Breezy of being rather lax on Robotnik's interference, despite the Freedom Fighters needing the Chaos Emerald to save the world. However, Breezy retorts by not humble bragging about how her not meddling with her own tournament made her the most financially powerful person in the world, regardless of the state said world is in.
In all honesty, I can't do this bit any justice here, so you'll just have to read it for yourself in order to see just how good it is.
Of course, Honey is not put off by Breezy's not callousness, and she leaves her office. Though Breezy does toss out a "we're not so different, you and I" statement, which Honey brushes off. And yup, you can see just how not upset she is by this turn of events, something which isn't helped by Coconuts giving her this not ominous look.
Although he could just be not jealous of how not good she looks in those not boots. That's also a not possibility.
And that's the end of the Champions arc. Okay, well, actually it comes to an end when the old guy calls the Freedom Fighters up on Skype, but you know what I mean.
Sonic the Hedgehog 268 to 271 is a fantastically fun story, and I give it a 6 out of 10 objectively, and an 8 out of 10 personally.
Now admittedly, the artwork by Deanna Skelly does have the occasional flub, such as with the size of the prototype Silver Sonic in the opening of the second issue, but those are the exception rather than the rule, as the rest of the artwork just breathes personality, with actions being fluid and characters being highly expressive. Sure, it's a very cartoony style, but it works well with a largely light-hearted action story such as this one. Speaking of, the story is just as good as the art, in that it has the odd small problem, but is overall greatly drawn. Or written in this case.
That said, the area where this story truly shines is with the characters.
Seriously, every prominent character, heck, any character who shows up here, has such a massive force of personality in just the artwork alone. Yes, even nameless background characters. That said, my personal favorite example of this has got to be the few interactions between Chip and Knuckles. Sure, they don't happen all that often, but when they do, they bring out so much out of both characters.
And, seeing as Chip has such good interactions with a character he never even met in the game he debuted in, I'm sure every other interaction he'll have with all the other characters he'll meet in this comic will be equally as good and memorable. Why am I feeling disappointed all of a sudden?
That aside, Breezy is easily the best character in this story, which really isn't all that surprising when you realize that she is, for all intents and purposes, driving the plot. It's her tournament after all, and almost every plot point can be directly tied to her actions. Not to mention how the first issue establishes everything we need to know about her, every other issue just added to that. Not to mention, this story clearly set her and Honey up as parallels to each other, with them both being successful business-savvy women who are not opposed to using underhanded tactics. The difference being that, while Honey does use cheap tricks, she still has an overall moral nature, and even a bit of a heroic streak. Breezy, on the other hand, has no qualms about undercutting anybody she needs to for the sake of gaining influence, even if everybody else suffers as a result. A fact which is clearly making Honey regret signing that business deal with her.
And oh boy, can I not wait till the next story these characters show up in, which will definitely follow up on all the plot points and character arcs this story set up.
Yeah, something I should point out, because of Archie Sonic's cancellation, which led to the creation of IDW Sonic, a lot of plot points and character arcs set up in the post-reboot continuity wind up going nowhere. A problem that is only exacerbated by the latter half of the pre-reboot continuity also having the same problem. So you should expect a lot of me saying, and that was the last time this character was ever seen.
Fortunately, both Honey and Breezy showed up again as minor characters in at least one more story. On the other hand, well... And this was the last time the S6 Squad was ever seen.
That disappointment aside, Champions is a fun side story, and you should definitely read it for yourself if you like Sonic the Hedgehog, or even if you have some free time.
And that's the end of the review. Tune in next time when I'll be reviewing something else. Maybe. Until then, have a good day.
Man, don't you just hate it when you're just chilling with your bros, then suddenly you're outed as a werewolf? Totally embarrassing.